Alright, in this video we're going to learn how to write and append to a file in Python. In the previous video we learned how to read from a file in which we had to first open the file in our program so that we can actually interact with and read from the file. So now in the second part of the file opening in Python, I'm going to be explaining how to actually write and append to a file. So the difference between reading and writing and appending is that, well, for reading, we basically store a variable. We're actually reading from a file, and after we've read from the file, we're storing that inside a variable and outputting that to the terminal. So that's what we did in the last video. We read from a file, we stored that in the variable, and outputted to the terminal. But in the case of writing and appending, we're not outputting to the terminal. Rather, we're actually updating the file itself. So the main difference between write and append, however, is that when you're doing write, we're erasing the file and rewriting whatever you specified to write in the file. And when you do append, we're not erasing the file, we're actually adding on to the file. So to make it more clear, I'm going to demonstrate this. I'm going to demonstrate an example. So the way we actually had to open this words.txt file is we had with open and in parentheses the name of the file I want to open. I mean, in parentheses, we had the quotation marks, and in the quotation marks is the name of the file I actually wanted to open, and then we had as file. Now, there's actually a second optional argument that this open function has. So the first argument, recall, is that we had the name of the file, but the second argument that we can actually pass in is the mode of how we want to interact with the file. So recall, there are three ways we are interacting with the file. First, we're reading from a file. Second, we're writing to a file. And lastly, we're appending to a file. So by default, the mode is read. And we don't need to specify the mode of read, since if we only had this open words.txt, we're going to be, by default, we're going to be able to read from this file. But I will not be able to write to this file unless I specify the mode. So I'm going to put a comment here showing how we represent how we can write and append to a file. I'm going to say in a comment, W means write and A means append. Now, the reason why I didn't say read or R is because we don't need to actually specify it as a second argument, since we already able to read from a file, even if we don't have the read mode. So I'm just going to put another comment saying R means read. But I'm going to put this, I'm going to say this is actually not needed. So this is not needed because, as I mentioned before, read is a default mode, and therefore we don't need to specify the second argument. But if I actually want to write or append to this file, I have to provide the second argument. So recall that arguments are separated by commas. So this first argument is the name of the file. And the second argument is in quotation marks, we need to specify the letter of the mode. So this is why I gave the comment below here. So W means write, then I won't be writing write, rather I'll be writing the letter. So this is how we would represent the mode. We actually write the starting letter of the mode. So in this case, since we're writing from a file, the first letter of write is W, and therefore we're going to say W. If I wanted to append to a file, I would take the first letter of append, which is A, and I would instead say A. But the first letter of read is R, but as I said here, it's not needed, so I could just, we don't need to worry about this. But for writing, we need to say either A or W. But the first thing I'm going to demonstrate is writing to a file. So if I want to write to this file, what I would do here is file.write, and recall here we are using this alias that we specified as here. And .write is basically a function that is going to write and write to this file. So the way that write works is similar to the way that a print statement works. So the print statement, basically we have print, and then we have open and close parentheses, and then we had in quotation marks the text that we wanted to be outputted to the terminal. But in this case, we're actually not outputting to the terminal, we're updating the file itself. So we have file.write, and in quotation marks, I'm going to have the text that I want to write to this file. So for example, I'm going to say file.write coding. So that's all we need to do when you're writing to a file. We have this with open as file, specifying the mode as write, And one thing I also want to point out is if we have this W, we won't have access to appending or reading. So when you specify one mode, we won't have access to other modes. So for example, since I specified W here, then I won't be able to read from this file, and I won't be able to append to this file either. So if I do with open W as words.txt W as file, which means I'm writing to this file, and if I say file.write coding, what this essentially is going to do is it's going to first erase the whole file, and then it's going to write to this file. So if you see here that I run this, it's not going to be outputting to terminal, but if we do check the words.txt file, we see here that we initially had like more than one line of code, as we saw from what we initially had in the words.txt file, but we see here that we only have one line in this text file. So that's essentially what write does. It erases the whole file that we had before, and then it writes to this file. So here that we see here, we only have one line in this words.txt file. It says coding. That's what this file.write does for us. It's basically writing to this file what I specified here in quotation marks. So since I specified here in quotation marks coding, then it's going to go back to this words.txt file, and it's going to write coding to this file. So that's basically what write does. And if I wanted to add a second line if I wanted to write another thing to this file, what I would do is similar to what I did here. So file.write coding, I'm just going to say programming, for example. So what is this going to first write? So the first thing that's going to happen here is it's going to erase this words.txt file. So it's going to get rid of this coding. And then it's going to run these two that we had here. So it's going to erase the words.txt file, and then it's going to write to this file coding, and then it's going to write to this file programming. So now if you run this, and if you go to words.txt file, we see here that we have coding programming, but we see here that it's in one line. The reason for that is we don't have, when we're having these multiple file.write statements, we're not actually giving a new line of text. So remember, the way we represent a new line of text is by \n, and \n essentially means new line of text. So if you wanted to actually have this coding in one line and then give a new line of text and then write programming in the second line, what I would need to do here is coding \n. So first of all, it's going to write to this file coding, and then it's going to give a new line of text. So it's going to go to the next line, and then it's going to write programming. So basically that's the way we can write to a file. We can have different multiple write statements to a file, but we need to make sure that we include \n if you actually want to have multiple write statements and different lines in that words.txt file. So if I rerun this now, and if I go back to this words.txt file, we see here now that it's going to print out, it's going to have coding in one line in this text file, and then it's going to give a new line, and then it's going to have programming. So that's essentially how writing to a file works. And it's to summarize, we're basically erasing the file, and then whatever we specified in this code block is going to write to this file. So every time I say file.write, if I run this, it's going to keep erasing the file and writing these statements we have here. But if I don't want to erase this file, that's where append comes in. So if I want to actually append, which essentially means you're adding to a file, then I would need to replace this W to an A. So basically append is like write, except it's going to keep adding to a file rather than erasing the file. So if I run this, and here I have the same statement. So if I run this, and if I go here, we see here that we have coding programming, which we initially had, and then we have coding and programming once again. So that's basically what append does as the last mode. It basically keeps on adding to a file. Now, we see here that we have programming and coding in one line. So if you want to actually print that out in a new line, I'm just going to erase this. And if I wanted to add 2 more lines of code, I'm just going to say coding and programming again. What I would have to do here is specify the \n, because as I mentioned before, we need to also include \n in these file.write statements if you want to actually give a new line in the file. So now if you do with open words the text as file, the mode being A or append to this file, and if I do file.write coding and programming, and if I run this, now if we go back to the words.txt file, we see here it's going to add to this file, coding and programming. So that's essentially what add does. It it basically adds to a file, whereas for writing, it erases the file and writes whatever is specified. So that's basically what append does. But if I wanted to add one more line, if I wanted to add 3 more lines and say again, I'm just going to say file.write, and I'm just going to say, for example, Python. And now, if I run this, then it's going to add 3 more. We just got to wait for this to run. But if I run this, and now if I go back here, we see here it's going to add 3 more lines. In this text file, we see coding, programming, Python. So that's the way that append and writing does to a file, in which we can actually alter the file and not output to the terminal, just like we did for reading. So now we covered writing and appending to a file in this video. In the next video, we're going to go over recursion.